Hello makers, I'm Katherine from Minerva, and today we're going to stitch up the Chalk and Notch Wren Blouse and Dress. Let's get into it.
Let it go, what's the use in holding on? Can we find a way where we could spend some time alone? You know where to find me, you know which way to go.
Now the first thing that we need to do is gather up all of our materials. So we have tons of fabric here on Minerva, but we've made it nice and simple for you and have put together a couple of different kits for the Wren Blouse and Dress. I will link them down below, including the variation that I am wearing. And this is actually made from a super fine Egyptian cotton and is oh so soft. If you have never stitched with Egyptian cotton before, I highly recommend it.
Now this Egyptian cotton is so soft and I love how vibrant the colors are. Next up, we are going to have the paper pattern for the Wren Blouse and Dress and some FUSIBL interfacing, as well as some needles that go with the fabric. Of course, we're going to need a couple of buttons and some elastic, which is used for the sleeves, and of course, matching Gutermann thread.
Now that you've gathered everything up, the next thing to do is to choose which view you are going to make. So we have two different views. We have view A, and that one is the version that I decided to make in the blouse version, and it is also offered in the dress version. And then view B is slightly different, and the sleeves come down a little bit longer on that one, but they still have a really nice volume to those sleeves as well. So once you've decided what view you're going to do and have cut out your pattern and all of your fabric pieces, you need to go ahead and start fusing those interfacing pieces onto the pieces that require them.
So for steps 1 and 2, we're going to do the FUSIBL and stay stitching along that facing edge. So we're going to take the facing pieces and make sure it's right side facing up, give it a good press to get out any wrinkles, and then place the FUSIBL interfacing right on top there. And I am going to use a pressing cloth just to make sure I'm protecting everything. Don't push your iron around, just lift it up and down and give it a bit of steam so that it is fused nicely on there, and it should look just like this. And we're going to do that for all of the facing pieces along the neck edge. So right here we've got the front, this one is the back facing piece, and then we've got 2 extra strips that are going to fuse onto the front side of our blouse. So next we're going to stay stitch here. Now when we stay stitch the neck edge into a center, we're going to start at the shoulder seam, go to the center, clip our threads, and then I'm just flipping this around. So now it's the wrong side of the fabric, starting at that neck edge, going towards the center. So always remember to go towards the center. This is cut on a bias and it will stretch. So you don't want to start at one shoulder and go all the way to the next, or that stay stitching isn't going to act correctly. Now for the darts. Now with this, we are going to transfer our darts based on our pattern markings here, and I am just using a water-soluble marker, and apologies that you can't see it as well on the camera. I should have used my chalk, but I'm just so used to using this marker here. So I've marked out my dart. You're going to pinch the dart at the top, match up the dart legs here, and I am just using my pin to see that I am getting through exactly on the line on both the front and the back of the dart. And so once we have it pinned perfectly in place, then you can go ahead and stitch it. So we're going to start at the bottom end where the legs are and end at the point. So you can see I've already completed this one here. So when you're at the sewing machine, at the bottom end of the legs of the dart, you can back stitch. Continue going up along this dart until you reach the point, but do not back stitch. In order to get a clean finish, you're going to leave some long thread tails, and then go ahead and take those thread tails and knot them 2 or 3 times to secure the thread. This is going to ensure that your dart lays nice and flat, especially when working with a fine fabric like this Egyptian cotton. So we have a fisheye dart here on the back of our bodice. So with that, I've matched up the points, so the top and bottom points as well as the side point that form that diamond or fish eye dart. So I've placed those in first, and then I am going ahead, and just as I do every other dart, I am putting my pins in and checking along the back to make sure that it is on the point. And then you are going to actually tie off on either end of that fisheye dart. So with this, you want long tails at the start and long tails at the end. So do not backstitch at all in this dart. And once that is complete, it should look like so for the back. Now we need to press these darts. So the front darts on the bust, we are going to press them going down. And I'm just using a decent amount of steam. Now for these fisheye darts, we want to press them towards the side seams. So going in here, I'd like to warm up the tip of my dart and then go over. And we're going to repeat for the other side. Now I like to grab my pressing ham on the darts here and just go over that on the right side. Now for steps 5 to 11, the shoulder seams and the neck facing. So with this, we are going to attach the bodice together with the front and the back with right sides facing along the shoulder seams. So go ahead and pin those shoulder seams in place. And then stitch them, and I go ahead and serge the edges. Then you're going to press them down towards the back of your bodice. Now, if you don't have an overlocker, you can always zigzag these. For the facings, we are going to place them right sides together, and be sure to pay attention to where the notches are to make sure you're putting them in the correct position. And you'll see this will overlap just slightly. Stitch that together and press the seam open, and then do your seam allowance all along the curved edge on the outer edge. This will be a folding guide for us to get this edge folded over so we can have a nice clean finish from the inside. So get that nice and pressed, and it will look like this from the wrong side of our facing. Now to attach that facing to the neckline edge. So if you notice when we match up the shoulder seams, there's a big gap between the center front. Well, remember that interfacing that we pressed on there? That actually forms the button placket. So we want to match up the corners of our facing to the edge of the bodice. So this is really important here. So don't worry about it not fitting right now. It will all come together later. Now do pay attention that that edge that we folded up maintains being folded up. We want to make sure it's stitched in that manner. And when we stitch, we're going to stitch all the way down. So continue that seam allowance going all the way down. So you can see that I have that folded edge going up and the seam allowance stitched all the way down. So now when we press it, we're going to press it towards that placket on the bodice. So we're just going to press there and continue to press along that stitching line, which happens to be our fold guide. And you're just going to repeat that on the other side as well. So once that is done, match up those shoulder seams. And so I like to do that. First, I put in 2 pins, one on either side of the seam allowance, just to make sure that my shoulder seams are perfectly matched up. Then I go ahead and pin the back neck facing in place, and now here's where the magic happens. So you see how when we ease this in, it does fold over, and in fact that seam where the facing attaches to the front of the bodice placket matches up to the notch that is on the front bodice piece. So you will know that you have folded it over correctly because those notches are going to match. So just go in and use as many pins as necessary to make sure everything lies nice and flat. And then go ahead and stitch that, being sure to backstitch. Clip these corners so that we can get a nice crisp curve, and then grade those seam allowances down going all the way around. So I've graded those seam allowances out, and then you need to press it. Now press it with the seam allowance going towards the facing pieces. When you get to these curves, pull out your pressing ham because it'll make going over these curves significantly easier, and you're not going to wrinkle your fabric on the rest of it. Now, once you have that all pressed, we are going to understitch. So we're going to understitch from the right side going all the way around. Now, because we have those sides stitched in, we won't be able to get all the way to the edge. So you're going to get as close to either edge as possible, but a good 1 or 2 inches is all right if you don't understitch that. It's not going to be the end of the world. Do be sure to backstitch and then stitching very close to the edge, making sure you're still catching that seam allowance in there. Go ahead and understitch going all along this facing piece. So I wanted to give a little bit of a closer look at this so you can see I'm stitching very close to that seam line because we did grade our seam allowances down. So it is very tight here. So once that is done, you can see it looks like this, and my stitching does not go all the way to the end because I just can't get all the way to the end with my presser foot. So next comes the fun part. I always love pressing a facing when we have understitched it because it falls into place absolutely perfectly. So go ahead and poke out those corners and line up that facing. I like to press the neck edge first before I get the rest of that facing going down the front of the bodice. So coming in here, now it should lie completely flat, so get out any wrinkles because when we top stitch, we don't want to have any wrinkles in here. So take your time, go nice and slow, and make sure that everything is nice and smooth. This pressing part is always so important to have that polished, finished end result within your garment. Just fold over those edges, and once you've got that neck facing all pressed, now we can go down and press the front button placket facing along the front of the bodice. So just go down the one side and then come back to the side we started on and just finish that, making sure it lines up along where the interfacing is. Now I like to go ahead and pin this just to make sure nothing slips around, especially when we are top stitching. Now, where you want to put a little bit more pins are going to be these curved areas because they can shift around and you don't want any bubbling on the right side of your fabric. So just make sure everything is nice and taut as you go around the neck edge here. Now, if you wanted to add a label prior to top stitching this down, this would be the perfect time to add in a nice fun label in the back. So make sure you get everything all pinned nicely in place, going down from one end to the other. Now we can go ahead and stitch this, and we're going to top stitch along this outer edge here. Now you can stitch this with your regular foot, but I love to use an edge foot to do this. It gets so nice and close to the edge and really gives a very professional finish, and it is a heck of a lot easier. So I wanted to show you how I handle the curves with an edge foot. So I go right up and I place my needle down where I want the rest of my fabric to be, and then I just pivot as I normally would. Now in these curves, pay careful attention, keeping it nice and taut so you don't get any wrinkles. And our placket looks just like so, stitched wonderfully. Now for steps 12 through 24, the sleeves. Now with this, we are going to do 2 rows of stitching. Use a long basting stitch. I use a 5mm stitch. Pull up your bobbin thread and pull those thread tails nice and long. This will make it a lot easier when we go to gather. So you are going to gather from one notch to the other notch, and then go ahead and do a second row right there. Make sure both of those rows are within the seam allowance so you don't have to unpick any of your basting stitches. First thing I like to do is match up the center of my sleeve to the shoulder seam. Then I like to go in and match my notches, which happens to be where we started those gathering stitches. And then go in and finish along the edges. And we'll do that to the exact same thing on the other side of the sleeve, just matching up the edges and the notches. Now comes the fun part, and that's gathering that sleeve cap. So go ahead and separate the bobbin threads. I always like to do my stitching on the top side because you need to pull the bobbin threads, and I will be working from the wrong side of the fabric. So my bobbin threads are on the back side of the fabric. Gather up those threads so that they fit nicely. Now you can wrap these around a pin, but I like to knot them off and just clip them out of the way. Only do that if you are very certain that you have the exact size that you want with your threads, because once you clip them and knot them off, there's no going back. I'm fairly confident at this point, but if you're ever worried about not having enough gathering in there and having to readjust those gathering stitches, just wrap them in a figure 8 around a pin. Once you have the gathering stitches all tight and pinned, we can stitch that. So I went ahead and stitched it at my machine and then finished it with an overlocker, but you could also use a zigzag stitch. And now for the underarm seam of the sleeve. So I like to match up that seam that attaches the bodice to the sleeve, and I like to point my seam allowances towards the end of the sleeve, because that's the direction that our arm will naturally push that seam when we're putting our arm in. And then just pin the side, paying careful attention to that bust dart. So I have stitched it as well as serged the edges to finish that. And our shirt is really starting to come together. And now we need to add in the nice puff on the sleeves. So we have the second sleeve piece. We're going to place it right sides together and stitch it along the short end, and do finish that seam edge. Go ahead and press that to one side. Now it is the same on both the front and the back, but I would do each in opposite directions so you have both of them going towards the back. Match up that underarm sleeve with the underarm seam right sides together along the sleeve. Now we're actually matching up the larger size of the sleeve, so not the narrow end. The narrow end is going to be the end where our arm comes out. So this bigger piece here is what we're matching up to the sleeve. You will know right away if you have it on upside down because it just won't fit. So as we're going in here, we are just going to pin all the way around, making sure that everything is nice and there are no puckers and we're not catching anything. Now with this, we are actually going to do a French seam. So I am actually stitching this with wrong sides together. So that is very, very important. So you can see I have the seam sticking out on the right side of my blouse. Well, that doesn't look very beautiful now, does it? But if you've ever done a French seam, you will soon find out that it is going to look absolutely lovely. Now, the reason that we do this French seam like this is because it also gives additional structure to that puff on the sleeve to help it really puff out. So I am just placing my pressing hem here, and I want to press the seam so that it's pointing downwards. This is going to really help when I press this in half, again in a subsequent step. So I'm just really just pushing that seam down, making it nice and crisp. Then I'm going to fold it. Now I've got those two sleeve pieces right sides together. I'm going to take that pressing hem again, and then I am going to make sure that the edge of that seam is right along the edge here. And then you're going to press it in place. Now I should mention that the seam allowances that we're stitching on these sleeves are going to be half of what the regular seam allowance is, because added up, they will equal the full seam allowance. Now, if you find yourself not having a very straight stitch, you might want to go ahead and trim down that seam before you press it. And then once you've stitched that in place, you can pop this out and your French seam is all complete and it looks beautiful from the right side, and you have that structure on the inside. Now this is the sleeve facing. We're going to start by creating a memory hem. So I actually used my machine and stitched a line to guide for my pressing. I find that so much faster than actually going in with a gauge. We're going to press it right sides together, and then we're going to stitch it in place. So you can see I've got both of them here, and then we are just going to stitch right along here. So once that is done, we are going to press that open. And this is the sleeve facing. So next, match up the seam with the bottom seam of the end of your sleeve. Now this time it is right sides together. So go ahead here and just fit that in there. Use as many pins as necessary and get that stitched in place. So go ahead and stitch all the way around. So I've already stitched that in place. And the next thing that we need to do is get out our iron, and I am using a sleeve roll to do this because my pressing hem is not small enough to get in here. So just go in here, and then we're going to fold this up. So we want that seam allowance to get pressed up towards that facing bit on the sleeve. So just go in here and just maneuver it around your sleeve roll here to get it all nicely in place. Now, once that you have that, then I like to go in and understitch this and then press it down and stitch along the edge to hold it down. Now, when you do that, you want to leave an opening of about 1 inch because we need to insert that elastic. So go ahead and follow the pattern instructions to cut the amount of elastic that you need, or what you could do is measure on your arm to get the exact amount you need, and then don't forget to add in extra for that overlap on the elastic. So cut 2 lengths of elastic with that. And then I like to use 2 safety pins. I place 1 safety pin going horizontally along the bottom. That acts as my stopper. And then I do 1 going vertically, going along the elastic. And that's the one that I like to feed through. I find this trick is wonderful in preventing your elastic on the back end from going through the casing by accident. So just feed that all the way through. And then on the end here, we are just going to pull that elastic through, and we've got both ends. Make sure that nothing is twisted, overlap them, and then zigzag it in place. Once you have that, go back to where you left that 1 inch gap and stitch it down. So step 25, the hem. So this is super easy. We are just going to do a double fold on the hem. So I've already pressed the hem over. I've double folded it here, and then we're just going to stitch along the bottom using our edge foot. It should look just like so. Now on to step 26 to 28, the button placket and finishing. So it does come with a button guide, so go ahead and mark that, and this time I'm going to use my yellow chalk because it will show up a little bit better on the camera for you. And so I'm just marking this out on the one side. And then we are going to add buttons to the other side of the placket. So stitch the buttonholes on one and attach your buttons on the other side. So for the buttonholes, I like to use a button chisel. That way I don't have any accidents. You could use a seam ripper. I did that when I was first starting out. Now, when I attach my buttons on this blouse, I actually like to go over with a ruler and match them up so I get them exactly in the center here. So I know exactly where I need to place those buttons. So once they're on, our blouse is completely finished and we are all ready for the reveal.
Let it go, what's the use in holding on? Can we find a way where we could spend some time alone? You know where to find me, you know which way to go. As long as you love me, we'll be singing all night long. So take a minute.
The Wren blouse and dress really comes together nice and quickly and is lovely for a advanced beginner sewist to stitch up. You learn some things like putting in elastic casings as well as doing some button plackets. And you get some nice volume in the creative style details within the sleeves. Now, if you are new here, I do encourage you to create a profile here on Minerva. It is completely free, and you can share all of your wonderful sewing and crafting makes with the community. We'd love to see what you are creating, and don't forget to use the hashtags when you are sharing, especially if you've made this kit as well and have followed along. We really like to see what you are up to and what you are making. Now, if you have any questions at all, do let us know in the comments down below and we'll be sure to get back to them as soon as we're able. And if you're curious what I am up to here on Minerva, you can find me at Sheer Stitchery and I will link it down below. I'm always up to creating something new. Until next time, makers.